Okay, so artificial reefs, right. They're having a moment, but how do we make sure they're actually doing good for the ocean, not turning into like underwater junkyards? We're diving into some guidelines from the International Maritime Organization on this, published with the UN Environment Program back in 2009.
Going straight to the source, I like it. Yeah, those IMO guidelines are fascinating stuff, especially with artificial reefs becoming so popular. The thing is, they're not just about how to build a reef, but how to prevent them from becoming an excuse to just dump stuff in the ocean.
Okay, see, that's what worries me. I've watched enough documentaries to picture it, good intentions go bad, and suddenly it's not a beautiful reef, it's basically a ticking time bomb of garbage.
You're not wrong, and that's exactly what these guidelines are trying to stop. The IMO wants to be sure that any artificial reef project is a net positive for the environment. So they really look closely at the materials used, how the reef is designed. It all has to work with the existing ecosystem, not against it.
So no more of that, here's a pile of old tires, let's see what happens approach.
Definitely not. There's a really structured approach they lay out. Think of it like a three-tiered system. First, a country's got to officially recognize, hey, we need rules about artificial reefs.
Okay, so they're taking it seriously. It sounds like this isn't something you just do on a whim in your free time.
Exactly. So after recognizing they need rules, they actually create laws, which often become part of their existing coastal management stuff.
Makes sense, keeping it all under one umbrella.
Right. And then finally, they pick a specific authority, like an organization or government agency, to actually enforce those laws. They're the ones who will grant permits and keep an eye on how these reef projects are actually doing out there in the ocean.
So it's kind of like getting permission to build a treehouse, but with way, way higher stakes if it goes wrong. No offense to treehouses.
None taken. But you're right, the stakes are huge when you're talking about a whole ecosystem. And that's why these IMO guidelines are so important. They give a framework to make sure these reefs are done right.
So there's a whole process, like it's serious business building these reefs.
Oh, yeah, it's not something to just jump into.
So say I've got this brilliant idea for an underwater sculpture garden. Attract some fish, attract some tourists. What do I need to do to convince those permit people that I'm not just messing around? Besides learning how to weld underwater, obviously.
Well, first things first, you've got to show them that your project is actually needed in that spot.
Okay, so I can't just build a reef because, like, I think it would look cool down there.
Not exactly. You'd need to do your homework right, research the existing marine life, the water conditions, everything about that area. And then you got to show how your sculptures, because those are basically your artificial reef modules in this case, how those sculptures would actually fit in and improve that environment.
So I probably shouldn't build a giant metal shark that scares away all the little fish.
Probably not the best approach, no. What you make it out of is a big deal, too. You have to think about whether those materials are safe, will they last, and will they actually attract the kind of marine life you're hoping for. The IMO guidelines even get into all the different materials, like the pros and cons of concrete, steel. They even talk about using old ships.
Okay, I was going to ask about those shipwrecks you always see in documentaries. They're full of life. So could you intentionally sink something?
They can be amazing artificial reefs, shipwrecks, but there's a lot more to it than just, let's sink this old boat. It has to be totally cleaned out first, no fuel or oil or anything like that. And then the structure itself, is it going to hold up or is it going to fall apart in a bad storm and become a hazard itself? The IMO, they actually have a whole other set of guidelines just for using vessels as reefs.
So there's a whole process for cleaning them up and making sure they're safe.
Wow, and where you put it is super important. You got to make sure the wreck isn't going to be a danger to other boats or mess up the stuff that's already living there, or even if it's at the right depth for the kind of marine life you want to see there.
It sounds like finding that perfect spot where the reef does good and doesn't mess things up, that's a real skill.
It takes a lot of planning and research, that's for sure.
But even with all that, things could still go wrong, right? What if your amazing reef attracts, like, the wrong kind of fish?
Yeah,
Or it messes with the currents and harms the stuff that was already there?
that's where the monitoring comes in. And not just once, you have to keep an eye on it. The IMO, they really stress that short-term and long-term observation.
So you're watching to see if the reef is holding up okay, but also how it's actually becoming part of the neighborhood, right?
Yeah, you got it. Like, are the right plants and animals starting to make it their home? Are there any bad side effects for the environment around it? All of that.
It's like you have to keep checking in, making sure everything's still cool.
Basically. And those check-ins, they might involve actually changing the reef's design a bit,
Yeah.
adapting to whatever's happening around it. Or, and this is kind of a big deal, they might even decide to remove the whole reef if it's just not working out.
Whoa, so you can get a reef fired.
Well, it's not about punishment, it's about doing what's best in the long run. If it's doing more harm than good, sometimes the most responsible thing is to just take it out.
Wow, that's a tough call, but it makes sense.
It shows that they're serious about this, right? Learning from what happens and being willing to change course if they need to.
Definitely. So it's about being flexible because the ocean is always changing too.
Exactly. You got to be ready to adapt.
So building a reef isn't the end, it's just the beginning of a much bigger thing.
I like that. It's like you're starting this long-term relationship with the ocean.
And hoping you both get along. But are there ever times when, like, different countries work together on these reef projects? I mean, the ocean doesn't care about borders, right?
That's a really good point. And yeah, the guidelines, they talk about how important it is to share what we learn with each other. Like, if something works well in one part of the world, maybe it can help somewhere else too.
Right, because we're all in this together when it comes to the ocean.
For sure. And the guidelines even mention some of the ways countries are already doing this. Like there are these regional agreements. I think one's called the OSPAR Convention, where a bunch of countries are trying to come up with shared rules for artificial reefs. So they're all on the same page.
So there is some global cooperation happening, which is good to know. But with all this talk about science and rules, do the guidelines ever get into, like, the bigger questions about artificial reefs? Like, ethically, are we even supposed to be building them?
Those are some deep questions, and they're becoming more and more relevant, especially as we get better at, engineering the environment. The IMO guidelines, they're mostly about the nuts and bolts of how to build and manage these reefs, but they do say that these bigger questions, the ethical ones, they're super important to think about too.
It's like we're entering this whole new world of, I don't know, ocean management, where we're not just protecting what's there, but actually creating new stuff, which is exciting, but also, like you said, it brings up a lot of big questions.
No doubt. And those conversations about what we should or shouldn't be doing, those need to keep happening, not just between scientists, but everyone.
For sure, because it affects all of us.
Oh.
Okay, but before we go too far down that rabbit hole, there's one more thing I'm curious about from the guidelines. They mention something called a reef life cycle, which sounds kind of ominous. Like, are we talking about reef retirement homes?
Not quite. It's actually about what happens to a reef after it's been built, which is where all that monitoring we were talking about comes in. It's super important.
So it's not just a build it and forget it kind of thing. There's, like, a whole after party that we need to plan for.
Yeah, and that after party, it might involve tweaking the design a bit, adjusting to any changes in the environment, or, and I know we talked about this a bit, sometimes it means taking the reef out completely if it's not working the way it should.
Right, the reef firing we talked about. Tough but fair.
Yeah.
So a reef's job doesn't end when the construction is done, does it?
Nope, it's really just the beginning.
It really is about building something that works long-term, not just a quick fix.
Exactly. It's a commitment.
Yeah.
And those IMO guidelines, they don't just say, trust us, monitoring is important. They get into all the nitty-gritty, like what to look for, how often to check, even how to report all that information.
So they want to make sure everyone's on the same page, no hiding if something goes wrong.
Transparency is key, definitely.
Yeah. So when we say monitoring a reef, what are we actually doing? Are we just counting fish, or is it more complicated than that?
Oh, it's way more than a head count. We're talking about checking the whole reef structure. Is it stable? Is it breaking down?
Sure.
Then there's water quality, making sure there's no weird pollution coming from the reef itself.
Right, because that would defeat the whole purpose.
Totally. And then, of course, we want to know who's moving into this new reef, right? Which species are doing well? Are there any invasive ones taking over? It's about the big picture, seeing how the whole ecosystem is reacting to this new addition, good and bad.
So it's like a constant health check for the reef and everything around it.
That's a great way to put it. And all that monitoring, it's essential for two main reasons. One, it helps us catch problems early on before they become disasters. But just as important, it's how we learn. Every artificial reef is like this big experiment teaching us about how sea creatures interact, how they deal with changes, how they respond to what we do.
So it's not just about fixing mistakes. It's about getting to know the ocean better in the process.
You got it. And what we learn from each reef can help us build better ones in the future. It's like this upward spiral of knowledge and improvement.
building towards a future where we coexist better with the ocean, hopefully.
That's the goal.
So we're getting better at understanding what works. But are there any cool new technologies coming up, things that could change how we build reefs in the future?
Oh yeah, the guidelines even mention some of the possibilities. Like they talk about 3D printing, imagine that, using it to create these custom reef modules, like super precise copies of natural habitats.
Whoa, 3D printed reefs. That sounds straight out of a
It
movie.
does, doesn't it? But that technology, it's getting really good really fast. We can make shapes and textures now that we could only dream of before.
That's wild. So
Yeah.
it's not just that we're understanding reefs better, we've got the tools to build them in totally new ways.
Exactly. And it's not just about making them look cool, though that's a bonus. We can tailor these reefs to attract specific species or to solve certain environmental problems, like imagine building sensors right into the reef to monitor water quality or track fish movements. We'd get real-time updates on how the ecosystem is doing.
It's like giving the reef a voice so it can tell us what's going on down there.
I love that. It's like this shift from static structures to something way more dynamic, more responsive to what the ocean needs.
It's amazing to think about how far we've come from just dumping stuff in the ocean to this really thoughtful, high-tech approach.
It shows how much we're learning and how much we care about getting it right.
For sure. And those IMO guidelines, they might seem kind of technical at first, but they represent this big shift in how we think about our impact on the ocean. We're not just taking, we're trying to give back in a way that lasts.
And that takes careful planning and constant learning. That's what these guidelines are all about.
It's been amazing, really, diving into all this with you.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about reefs.
This deep dive has given us a lot to think about, the challenges, the innovations, and that big responsibility we have to get this right for the sake of the ocean.
Well said.
The deep dive, always leaving you with more to explore.